There's a profound truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, yet it holds the key to every emotional breakthrough, every moment of genuine healing, and every step toward authentic freedom. This truth lives in the space between what we received and what we needed, between the love we craved and the reality we experienced, between the mother we had and the mother our soul required to flourish. Understanding this relationship isn't just about psychology or family dynamics. It's about unlocking the very foundation of your ability to heal from anything life throws at you. Every human being enters this world through the gateway of the maternal connection, and that first relationship becomes the template for how we experience safety, love, acceptance, and our own worthiness. When we examine the deepest roots of emotional and physical illness, we consistently find that the quality of this primary bond influences everything from our immune system response to our capacity for intimate relationships, from our self-talk patterns to our ability to navigate stress and trauma. The research in neuroscience and psychoneuroimmunology has revealed that our earliest experiences literally shape the architecture of our brain and the functioning of our entire nervous system, creating patterns that can either support our healing or sabotage it for decades to come. The maternal wound isn't always obvious or dramatic. Sometimes it's found in the spaces between words, in the absence of emotional attunement, in the subtle message that our authentic self wasn't quite acceptable. Other times, it's more apparent. Criticism that became our inner voice, abandonment that taught us we're too much or not enough, conditional love that trained us to perform for acceptance rather than simply existing in our own inherent worth. But perhaps the most insidious form of maternal wounding comes from emotional neglect, where the basic need for mirroring validation and emotional safety went unmet, leaving us with a profound sense of emptiness that we spend our lives trying to fill from external sources. What makes this wound so powerful is that it's often invisible to our conscious mind, yet it operates like a hidden program running in the background of our lives. It influences who we choose as partners, how we respond to conflict, whether we can receive love and support, how we treat our own body when it's struggling, and most critically, whether we believe we deserve to heal and thrive. This unconscious programming begins forming before we even have language to understand what's happening, encoding itself in our nervous system through patterns of stress and safety connection, and disconnection, attunement, and misattunement. The mother-child bond creates our first understanding of what it means to be human in relationship. When this bond is secure and nurturing, we develop what psychologists call a secure attachment style, an internal sense of safety that allows us to explore the world, form healthy relationships, and recover from setbacks with resilience. We learn that our emotions are valid, that our needs matter, and that love doesn't have to be earned through perfection. The nervous system develops the capacity for what researchers call co-regulation, where we can both soothe ourselves and be soothed by others, creating a foundation for lifelong emotional and physical health. However, when this early relationship is marked by inconsistency, emotional unavailability, criticism, or trauma, we develop survival strategies that served us as children but often sabotage us as adults. We might become hypervigilant, always scanning for signs of rejection or disappointment. Our nervous system stuck in a chronic state of activation that exhausts our adrenal glands and compromises our immune function. We might learn to shut down emotionally to protect ourselves from further hurt, developing what clinicians call learned helplessness that can manifest as depression, chronic fatigue, or a sense of being disconnected from our own life force. We might become people pleasers, sacrificing our authentic needs to maintain connection, developing anxiety disorders as we constantly monitor others' moods and try to manage their emotions to feel safe. Or we might swing between extremes, desperately seeking love, while simultaneously pushing it away when it arrives, creating the very abandonment we fear most through our own defensive behaviors. These patterns don't just affect our emotional well-being. They create measurable changes in our physiology that can persist for decades. The stress response system that was activated repeatedly in childhood can remain chronically activated in adulthood, creating a state of ongoing inflammation that contributes to everything from autoimmune disorders to cardiovascular disease, from chronic pain to digestive issues. When we live in a constant state of fight or flight, our body's resources are diverted away from healing and maintenance towards survival, leaving us vulnerable to illness and unable to recover efficiently from physical or emotional stresses. But here's what's truly remarkable about the human capacity for healing. Our nervous system remains plastic throughout our lives, meaning these early patterns can be rewired through conscious effort and the right kind of healing experiences. Understanding these patterns isn't about blame or victimhood. It's about recognizing that our healing capacity has been there all along, waiting for us to create the internal conditions that allow it to flourish. The same nervous system that learned to protect us through hypervigilance or emotional shutdown can learn new patterns of safety and openness. The same brain that wired itself for survival can rewire itself for thriving. The path forward begins with developing what we might call an internal mother, a loving, accepting presence within ourselves that can provide the emotional nourishment we may not have received consistently in childhood. This isn't about replacing or dismissing our actual mother, but about taking responsibility for giving ourselves what we needed then and still need now. This internal maternal presence becomes a source of unconditional love-wise guidance and gentle support that's available to us 24 hours a day, regardless of external circumstances. Creating this internal maternal presence requires us to practice radical self-compassion, speaking to ourselves with the tenderness we would offer a beloved child who was struggling or in pain. It means learning to recognize and honor our emotions without judgment, understanding that all feelings carry important information and deserve to be acknowledged with kindness rather than criticized or suppressed. This process involves developing what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between different emotional states and respond to each one appropriately. When we feel anxious, our internal mother might remind us that anxiety is often excitement without breath and guide us toward grounding practices that help regulate our nervous system. When we feel angry, she might help us understand that anger is often a protective response to feeling hurt or threatened, and support us in expressing that anger in healthy ways rather than turning it against ourselves or exploding onto others. When we feel sad, she might wrap us in comfort and remind us that grief is love with nowhere to go, and that feeling our losses fully is how we create space for new joy to enter our lives. The process also involves grieving what we didn't receive. This grief isn't self-pity or wallowing. It's a necessary emotional process that allows us to release the fantasy of what should have been and accept what was, creating space for what can be. Many people resist this grief because they fear it will make them weak or bitter, but the opposite is true. When we can acknowledge our losses without trying to fix, justify, or spiritualize them away, we create room for genuine healing to occur. This grief work often happens in waves triggered by life events, anniversaries, or simply the natural process of maturing and understanding our childhood with adult awareness. One of the most challenging aspects of this work is learning to hold complexity around our maternal relationship. Our mothers were human beings, doing their best within their own limitations, carrying their own unhealed wounds, and operating within the constraints of their circumstances, knowledge, and emotional capacity. Many of our mothers were themselves products of difficult childhoods, shaped by cultural expectations, economic pressures, and their own unprocessed trauma. Recognizing this doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it can free us from the exhausting cycle of resentment that keeps us energetically tied to past pain. Understanding our mother's limitations with compassion doesn't mean we have to minimize our own pain or pretend that inadequate parenting didn't have real consequences in our lives. Both things can be true simultaneously. Our mother did her best within her capacity, and her best wasn't enough to meet our needs in certain crucial ways. This paradox is part of the human condition, and learning to hold it without trying to resolve it into a simpler narrative is part of emotional maturity. This work of maternal healing ripples out into every area of life in ways that can be quite surprising. As we develop a more nurturing relationship with ourselves, our body begins to feel safer and can redirect energy from survival mode toward healing and regeneration. People often notice that chronic conditions they've struggled with for years begin to improve as they learn to treat themselves with greater kindness and respect. The immune system functions more effectively when we're not in a constant state of stress, and inflammation levels decrease as we release old emotional patterns that kept our nervous system activated. Our relationships improve dramatically as we stop trying to get from others what we're learning to give ourselves. When we're no longer operating from a place of emotional emptiness, seeking validation, approval, or love to fill the void left by early deprivation, we can show up more authentically in our connections with others. We become less reactive to other people's moods and behaviors, less likely to take things personally, and more capable of maintaining our own emotional center while still caring deeply about others' well-being. The quality of our decision-making becomes clearer as we tune into our authentic needs rather than operating from old survival patterns. Many people find that they start making choices that truly serve their well-being rather than choices designed to avoid conflict, gain approval, or maintain familiar patterns, even when those patterns cause suffering. Career changes, relationship shifts, lifestyle modifications, and creative pursuits that had been suppressed often begin to emerge as we reconnect with our true desires and values. The healing process isn't linear or predictable, and this is crucial to understand, because many people become discouraged when they don't experience steady forward progress. Some days we feel strong and integrated, able to access our inner wisdom and respond to life from a place of centeredness. Other days we might feel like we're back at square one, triggered by something that reminds us of old wounds or activated by current stressors in ways that feel overwhelming. This is not only normal but expected. Healing happens in spirals, not straight lines, and each cycle allows us to process deeper layers of old material. What's essential is developing the capacity to be present with whatever arises without abandoning ourselves. When we notice we're in an old pattern, perhaps criticizing ourselves harshly, seeking validation from others, or shutting down emotionally, we can pause and ask, what would it look like to mother myself right now? What do I need in this moment? This question shifts us out of automatic reactivity and into conscious response, which is where all healing happens. Sometimes the answer is comfort and reassurance, speaking to ourselves the way we would speak to a frightened child who needs to know they're safe and loved. Sometimes it's gentle boundaries, recognizing that we need to protect our energy or limit our exposure to certain people or situations while we're in a vulnerable state. Sometimes it's the courage to speak our truth, even when we're afraid of how others might respond, trusting that our authentic voice deserves to be heard regardless of others' reactions. Often what we need most is simply the willingness to sit with difficult emotions without trying to fix or change them immediately. Our culture teaches us to quickly move away from discomfort, but healing requires us to develop the capacity to be present with our pain without being overwhelmed by it. This doesn't mean wallowing or becoming stuck in negative emotions, but rather learning to surf the waves of feeling without being knocked over by them. Physical symptoms often begin to shift as this emotional work progresses, sometimes in dramatic and unexpected ways. Chronic tension may start to release as the nervous system learns to feel safer, allowing muscles that have been holding protective patterns for decades to finally relax. Digestive issues may improve as we're no longer in a constant state of fight or flight, allowing the parasympathetic nervous system to support proper digestion and elimination. Sleep may become more restorative as the mind learns to trust that it's okay to let down its guard and enter the vulnerable state required for deep rest. Energy levels may increase significantly as less of our life force is devoted to maintaining protective barriers and more becomes available for creativity, joy, and engagement with life. Many people report feeling more vibrant and alive than they have since childhood, as if they're finally able to access their full vitality rather than operating at a fraction of their capacity. Chronic pain conditions often improve as we release emotional pain that was being held in the body, and autoimmune conditions may stabilize as the nervous system stops perceiving the body itself as a threat. The transformation also shows up powerfully in how we relate to others. We may find ourselves attracting different kinds of relationships as our own energy shifts and we begin to resonate with people who are healthier and more conscious. Existing relationships may deepen as we become more willing to be vulnerable and authentic, or they may naturally fade away if they were based primarily on old patterns of codependency or mutual wounding. We might discover that we're less reactive to other people's moods and behaviors, more able to maintain our own center while still caring about others. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant, but rather developing what therapists call differentiation. The ability to maintain our own emotional state while remaining connected to others. We may develop better boundaries organically, saying no when we need to, without guilt, asking for help when we need it without shame, and expressing our needs clearly rather than hoping others will intuit them. Perhaps most importantly, we begin to trust our own inner guidance in ways that may have felt impossible before. So much of our suffering comes from disconnection from our own wisdom, constantly second-guessing ourselves or seeking external validation for decisions we're perfectly capable of making. As we heal the maternal wound, we reconnect with our own intuitive knowing and learn to trust the intelligence of our own heart and body. This inner compass becomes increasingly reliable as we practice listening to it and honoring what it tells us. This doesn't mean we become isolated or completely self-reliant. Healthy interdependence, the ability to both give and receive support, to be vulnerable and strong, to need others while also being self-sufficient, becomes possible when we're not operating from a place of desperate emptiness or defensive self-protection. We can enjoy solitude without feeling lonely, and we can engage in deep connection without losing ourselves in the process. The ripple effects of this healing extend far beyond our personal lives in ways that can transform not just our own experience, but the experience of everyone around us. When we are no longer unconsciously seeking the love and approval we didn't receive in childhood, we can show up more authentically in our work, bringing our full creativity and passion rather than operating from fear or the need to prove our worth. Our friendships become more genuine as we stop performing for acceptance and start sharing our real selves, including our struggles and imperfections. Many people notice that their relationship with their actual mother begins to shift as they do this internal work, sometimes in surprising ways. When we're no longer energetically hooked into old patterns of seeking her approval or trying to get her to understand our pain, the relationship can find a new equilibrium. Sometimes this means the relationship improves as we're able to interact from a place of wholeness rather than neediness or resentment. We might find ourselves able to appreciate what she was able to give while no longer being devastated by what she couldn't provide. Sometimes healthy boundaries become clearer as we're no longer willing to accept treatment that doesn't honor our worth as human beings. This might mean limiting contact, setting clear expectations about respectful communication, or refusing to engage in conversations that consistently leave us feeling diminished or attacked. These boundaries aren't punishment, but protection, allowing us to maintain connection where it's genuinely nourishing while protecting ourselves from ongoing harm. And sometimes, if the relationship is too toxic or harmful, we're able to create necessary distance without the guilt and self-doubt that previously kept us trapped in painful dynamics. This kind of protective distancing often brings up intense feelings of grief, fear, and sometimes relief, all of which are valid responses to the complex reality of having to limit contact with someone who was supposed to love and protect us unconditionally. The goal isn't to have a perfect relationship with our mother. It's to have a healthy relationship with ourselves that isn't dependent on her changing, acknowledging our experience, or validating our perspective. This internal shift often creates space for more authentic connection if that's possible and desired, but it also provides protection and stability if the relationship remains challenging or if our mother is unable or unwilling to engage in healthier patterns. For those whose mothers are no longer living, this work can be particularly poignant and complex. The opportunity to repair the actual relationship may be gone, but the opportunity to heal the internal relationship, to finally give ourselves what we needed, and to free ourselves from old patterns remains fully available. Sometimes people find that doing this work allows them to feel more connected to their deceased mother than they did when she was alive, as they're able to access the love that was there beneath the limitations and wounds. The practice of developing our internal mother is ongoing and deeply creative, requiring us to discover what forms of self-nurturing, resonate most deeply with our particular needs and temperament. Some people find it helpful to have literal conversations with this loving internal presence, either through journaling or meditation, asking for guidance and support when they're struggling with difficult decisions or emotional challenges. Others create rituals of self-care that honor this relationship, perhaps taking themselves on solo dates to places that bring them joy, buying flowers for their own enjoyment without waiting for someone else to think of it, or creating a physical space in their home that feels nurturing and safe. Some find comfort in developing a morning ritual, where they check in with themselves the way a loving mother might check in with her child, asking questions like, "How are you feeling today? What do you need? How can I support you?" Others prefer evening practices, where they reflect on the day with self-compassion, acknowledging both their efforts and their struggles without judgment. The specific form matters less than the quality of attention and care we bring to these practices. The key is consistency and authenticity. This internal nurturing voice needs to be genuine, not a spiritual bypass or positive thinking overlay on unprocessed pain. It acknowledges reality while offering comfort and support. It validates our struggles while encouraging our growth. It holds both our wounds and our possibilities, with equal tenderness, never minimizing our pain, but also never allowing us to become stuck in victim consciousness. As this work deepens over months and years, many people discover a profound sense of coming home to themselves that they've never experienced before. The frantic searching for something outside themselves to complete them begins to quiet. The harsh internal critic that may have dominated their inner landscape starts to soften, replaced by a voice that's firm when necessary, but always fundamentally kind. The anxiety about whether they're good enough, lovable enough, or worthy enough begins to dissolve as they experience firsthand their own inherent value. This doesn't mean life becomes easy or that all challenges disappear. In fact, some people find that as they heal, they become more sensitive to their environment and more aware of dysfunction in their relationships and circumstances. But there's a fundamental shift in how challenges are met. Instead of feeling like evidence of personal inadequacy or cosmic unfairness, difficulties become opportunities to practice self-compassion, to strengthen resilience, and to deepen trust in our own capacity to navigate whatever arises. The healing of the maternal wound is ultimately about reclaiming our birthright, to feel safe in our own skin, to trust our own experience, and to move through the world with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing we can take care of ourselves no matter what happens. It's about breaking the generational cycles of emotional poverty that get passed down unconsciously from parent to child, and creating a legacy of emotional wealth for ourselves and future generations. This work requires tremendous patience, commitment, and often professional support, but it's some of the most important work we can do, not just for ourselves but for everyone whose life we touch. When we heal our own capacity to receive and give love, we become part of the solution to the epidemic of disconnection and emotional suffering that characterizes so much of modern life. We model for others what it looks like to take responsibility for our own healing, while maintaining compassion for those who haven't yet been able to do this work. The invitation is to begin where you are with whatever capacity you have right now, understanding that this is not a destination, but a lifelong practice of coming into right relationship with yourself. Perhaps it starts with noticing how you speak to yourself when you make a mistake, experimenting with offering yourself the same kindness you would offer a good friend. Maybe it begins with asking what you need in a moment of stress, rather than immediately trying to push through or numb out. It might start with setting one small boundary that honors your well-being, or with doing one small thing each day that feels nurturing and caring, even if it seems insignificant. The mother wound may be the deepest and most universal wound we carry as human beings, but it's also the doorway to the most profound healing available to us. When we learn to give ourselves what we needed most, we discover that we've always carried within us everything necessary for our own restoration and thriving. This is the paradox and the promise of the healing journey. In learning to mother ourselves with the love we always deserved, we finally come home to the wholeness that was, never actually broken, only hidden beneath layers of adaptive protection that are no longer needed.